A first-time home buyer, a seasoned investor, or just curious about the real estate world, we're here to make sure you understand every aspect of your journey. Today we're diving into a topic that's often a bit intimidating but incredibly important: real estate contracts. These documents are the foundation of any property deal, and understanding them is crucial to making confident and informed decisions. So let's break down the basics of real estate contracts, common terms, contingencies, and what to look out for before signing. Now let's start with the essentials. What exactly is a real estate contract? At its core, a real estate contract is a legally binding agreement between a buyer and a seller regarding the purchase, sale, or exchange of a property. But here's the thing, real estate contracts are full of specific terms and conditions that must be carefully understood by both parties. A contract typically includes details like the purchase price, closing date, any contingencies, and in some cases specific obligations of both the buyer and the seller. And because this is a legally binding document, any misunderstanding or oversight can lead to legal or financial complications down the line. One of the first things to look out for in a real estate contract is the earnest money deposit. Earnest money is a deposit the buyer puts down when making an offer to show they're serious about purchasing the property. Think of it as a way of saying, I'm committed to this deal. Generally, earnest money is held in an escrow account until closing, where it's either applied to the down payment or returned to the buyer, depending on how the deal progresses. Now, while the amount can vary, it's typically between 1% to 3% of the property's purchase price. If the sale falls through due to a contingency, which we'll dive into later, the buyer often gets the earnest money back. However, if the buyer backs out without meeting a contingency, that deposit might go to the seller. So make sure to pay close attention to the terms surrounding earnest money in any contract you're considering. Now, on to contingencies. Contingencies are conditions that must be met for the sale to proceed, and they're an important safeguard for both buyers and sellers. There are several common contingencies that protect buyers, starting with the inspection contingency. This allows the buyer to have a home inspection done to uncover any hidden issues in the property. Think structural issues, plumbing or electrical concerns, mold and other potential headaches. If the inspection reveals significant problems, the buyer can negotiate repairs or back out of the deal altogether. This contingency is particularly important because it gives the buyer a chance to assess the property beyond its surface appeal. Next, there's financing contingency. This one is essential if you're buying with a mortgage rather than cash. A financing contingency essentially says that the deal depends on the buyer securing a loan. If for some reason the buyer's loan is denied, this contingency allows them to back out of the sale without losing their earnest money. Without a financing contingency, a buyer could be forced to buy a home they can't afford, or they could lose their earnest money deposit. This safeguard can relieve a lot of stress, especially if you're navigating a competitive market. We also have the appraisal contingency. This is buyers using financing because lenders typically won't more than the appraised value of the property. For instance, if you agree to pay $300,000 for a home, but the appraisal comes in at $280,000, the lender may only approve a loan for the lower amount. The appraisal contingency allows the buyer to renegotiate the price or, if necessary, back out of the deal. This prevents buyers from overpaying and protects their financial interests. One more common one to know is the title contingency. Before a sale is finalised, a title search is conducted to ensure the property is free of hindrances. The title contingency gives buyers a way out if the title isn't clear, meaning that the property is truly the seller's to sell. For example, if a title search reveals an outstanding tax lien or an ownership dispute, the buyer can walk away or require the seller to resolve the issue before closing. Now that we've covered contingencies, let's talk about closing costs. This is one area where many buyers, especially first-timers, are caught off guard. Closing costs are fees that come due at the end of a real estate transaction, and they're typically between 2% and 5% of the purchase price. These can include fees for title insurance, loan origination, attorney's fees, escrow fees, and more. Often, real estate contracts will specify who's responsible for which closing costs. Sometimes the buyer, sometimes the seller, and sometimes both. It's a good idea to understand these costs up front so you're not surprised at the closing table. Another essential component of the contract is the closing date. This is the date when the property officially changes hands from the seller to the buyer. Both parties agree on this date, which is typically 30 to 45 days after the contract is signed, although it can vary depending on financing and other factors. Some contracts might also include a possession date, which is when the buyer can officially move in. It's possible for these dates to differ. For example, a seller may need a few extra days to move out after closing. These timelines are usually spelled out clearly in the contract, so make sure to review them carefully to avoid any last-minute surprises. Let's also address disclosures. Real estate contracts often require sellers to disclose specific information about the property's condition, history, or any known issues. Disclosures are legally mandated in many places to protect buyers from purchasing a property with serious defects that the seller knew about but didn't disclose. Common disclosures include things like lead paint in older homes, known water damage, or issues with the foundation. While disclosure laws vary by location, this section of the contract is essential for buyers because it helps them make an informed decision. Before signing on the dotted line, another critical step is reviewing the fine print for any penalties or fees. Real estate contracts sometimes have clauses that outline penalties if the buyer or seller fails to meet their contractual obligations. For example, there could be a penalty if the buyer doesn't secure financing by a specific date, or if the seller fails to vacate the property by the possession date. These penalties can range from financial compensation to forfeiture of the earnest money deposit. So it's vital to read every part of the contract carefully, perhaps even with a real estate attorney's help, to ensure you fully understand your obligations. As we move toward wrapping up, let's touch on amendments and addendums. During the negotiation process, it's common for additional conditions or amendments to be added to the contract. An addendum is any addition to the original contract terms, while an amendment modifies an existing part of the contract. For instance, if the buyer requests that the seller make certain repairs before closing, this could be documented as an addendum. If anything changes after both parties have signed the contract, it's critical to document these changes formally to ensure they're legally binding. And lastly, remember, don't rush the review process. Take the time you need to fully understand every aspect of the contract. A real estate transaction is one of the most significant financial commitments most people make, and it's worth taking an extra day or two to review everything carefully. If there's anything you don't understand, consult with a real estate agent or a real estate attorney. They're there to help. In conclusion, real estate contracts can be complex, but understanding them can make the process much smoother and reduce potential risks. From understanding contingencies and closing costs to carefully reviewing every term before signing, these steps will empower you as a buyer or seller. So next time you're about to sign a real estate contract, you'll know exactly what to look for. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to Journey Realty Group for more real estate insights and advice. Drop any questions you have in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. See you in the next video.